When the Hong Kong Tramway Electric Company Limited was officially registered as an incorporation in 1902, it was registered in London by the law firm Ingle, Holmes and Sons. The directors were three English merchants by the names of Edmund Charles Morgan, Robert Miller, and Walter John Charles Cutbill. In the company's London headquarters on number 19 St. Swithin's Lane, roughly marked here in this map of London from 1896, so as to give you an idea of the centrality of the company's office. And this was the place from which Morgan, Miller, and Cutbill, the directors, were responsible for making vital decisions about the construction, development, and operations of this gigantic transport system that was due to be built about 13,000 miles away by ocean voyage in the island of Hong Kong, which was snidely remarked upon as a barren rock by Foreign Secretary Lord Palmerston. Yet taking a step back, I want us to consider why the tram came to Hong Kong, for whom it served, and beneath the wooden metal veneer, what it represents. Guided by this set of questions, I'm most intrigued by the approach of thinking about the tramway transportation system as an object of design within the context of its urban site, Hong Kong. And design here will be investigated in the dissertation as an effort by the British Colonial government to exert power, engender order, and enforce segregation. These are all topics that I've explored in my first chapter and eager to share the findings with you today. At the end, I'd really appreciate your reflections on ways to strengthen my current arguments and research approach of the tramway transport network as colonial design agent. Now we first begin in 1841, the year in which Hong Kong first became a British settlement, and during which the only existing land networks on the island were Chinese paths. Here we see a map by Captain Collinson, who was a surveyor of the Royal Engineers and carried out the earliest British surveys. He produced detailed sketches of Hong Kong that have now become vital illustrative references for historians. The dotted and solid lines in the image here represent Chinese paths and roads. They noticeably stay close to the contours of the coastline and avoid the mountainous topography that dominates Hong Kong. In reality, these island roads were little more than tracks constructed primarily to facilitate the movement of troops and police. The main communications and transportation lines were constructed to service the flow of vessels along the harbor, whereas internal transport on land was negligible and evidenced by the scant lines depicted in Collinson's map here. Town planning in Hong Kong was as much a first step as road improvements were towards cultivating the island into a British colonial landscape, carried out as a swift diplomatic act of power dominance to serve trade, commerce, and military defense needs, all of which contributed towards the establishment of the Hong Kong tramways and literally allowed for tracks to be laid into the foundations gained from the series of land reclamation projects that followed. In 1843, the colonial land officer A.T. Gordon proposed to develop three districts on the north side of the island, Sheung Wan, Central, and Wan Chai, to become areas for housing, administration buildings, commercial activities. Gordon intended to transform these sites along the North Shore into powerful and thriving centers in the late 19th century. And by 1845, Gordon's attempt to provide a comprehensive urban blueprint for the new colony had taken shape. This blueprint, importantly, went on to become a powerful tool of influencing not just the economic and social configuration of the settlement, but also the social movement of the city and the public infrastructures that came with it, such as the tramway. Therefore, to an extent, Gordon's town planning set the foundations to the subsequent development of the tramway's route planning that linked up these three core districts, among others, along the North Shore, from west to east. Back in the 19th century, the only public conveyances available were limited, if not by foot or animal-drawn vehicles, then by rickshaws and sedan chairs. They were the preferred primary forms of transportation before the electric tram came into service. And though these were only afforded by the Europeans and a small community of Chinese elites, riding these were a symbol of status, and therefore it wasn't a transport for the common citizen. As you can probably imagine, the road system was chaotic in 19th century Hong Kong. there was immense support to bring some semblance of order into the streets. New transport facilities were therefore imperative, and electric trams were seen as a solution to alleviating transport difficulties in the city. In 1901, tramway schemes were promoted by the colonial government, who were caught up in the flurry of enthusiasm for urban streetcars, and tramways already flourishing across the United Kingdom, Europe, and North America. By the same year, there were almost 40 electric tramways in towns and cities across the UK. Then, in 1902, the following year, when the Hong Kong Tramway Electric Company Limited came into existence, they laid down a tramway line running from the Western District of Kennedy Town all the way to the Eastern District of Shau Kei Wan. The tracks were laid into existing flat land that contoured around the island, and also on newly formed surfaces from land reclamation projects. For one, the tramway service extended the influence of British colonialists more widely across the island. It demonstrated a systematic and a measured approach to creating order in Hong Kong's urban planning and development. The tram provided an ordered and defined means of land-bound traveling route through the grid-like street patterns. And although this map is dated 1954, the route has remained faithfully similar throughout the years since its inception. Such a route enhanced the cohesive connection between the central area and other harbourfront districts, communities, and commerce. It brought continuity and convenience linearly across the island. In other words, it enabled greater rural-urban mobility across the northern shore. Finally and briefly, design is segregation. The Tramway Ordinances, which is a piece of primary legislation, outlines clearly that the company provides third-class cars for Chinese only, that the compartment is to be reserved solely for the use of passengers of Chinese race. On several occasions, European passengers have been liable to heavy fines and court rulings, as these two newspaper articles describe. What these cases elucidate is a condition of segregation built into not just the social-political system of British Hong Kong, but extends also into the formation of the tramway company, from the ordinance that oversees the legality of how the operation and services are run, down to the infrastructural design of tramcars that enforce class divisions amongst its passengers based on race, and therefore class system of colonial Hong Kong. Tramcars were not all made to be ridden in an egalitarian manner, and it was not until 1972, almost 70 years after the establishment of the tramway company, were class distinctions in tramcars abolished and a flat fare introduced. I hope this overview was able to shed some light on considering the tramway system as a design element to the urban fabric, as a means to exert power, engender order, and enforce segregation. I look forward to your feedback.